So as soon as we get that language, and we can look at that, and then we can.
Yeah, everybody has it in their inbox. I just sent it to Nathan also in case.
Okay, I'm going to switch gears. David's just joined us.
Oh, great.
Because that's going to take more time, and want to have David walk through the proposed changes to what the House did. I'll just give you a little preview of the thinking. We heard from Joan that this program was designed primarily and almost exclusively because she thought the $10 million would run out in the first priority that the House put in for new businesses that couldn't qualify for federal funds because they got established or bought the business after February 15th, I think. So she felt that was a gap in the funding. My understanding from Jane Kitchell is that this will be entirely CRF money. So there's some flexibility there. The other thing that Joan said was that she was going to require applicants for this new program to submit 2020 tax returns. And I said to her, well, and this was a couple of weeks ago, I mean, the tax returns are not due to April 15th. And if this program gets running in the next few weeks, maybe people haven't filed a tax return. She basically said, it doesn't matter. We want to see the 20 tax return. And if they want to apply for this program, they're going to have to file their 2020 tax return. And there are a couple of other changes in there. One is at the end, which tries to get at the perennial problem over this whole COVID thing of where we sort of get a proposal from the administration and don't have the resources or time to do it justice. And so it's a sort of a weak attempt to say that the administration shall collaborate and connect with this policy committees as they develop their new proposals under the Biden plan through legislative council and joint fiscal. So at least we're hearing about things as they develop. I think both myself and the auditor asked to be part of the teams that the governor established on the economic recovery plan, and they didn't necessarily want us there, which is their right, but we have a right to push back and say we want to be kept abreast, and so we have more time and more knowledge when we do have to respond, whatever they put on the table. So those are a few of the things that are in there, but I'll let David walk us through the bill, and I could comment as we go along as to some of the thinking behind other changes. Oh, I guess the other big one is because Joan said she thinks all the money is going to be used for these left behind businesses. That, as you recall, was the first priority of the funding. And the second priority was people who could already have gotten grants. And this would be extra money with a 6-factor laundry list, which I felt was pretty ill-defined. So what I'm suggesting is we just get rid of that second priority list and give it all to the new businesses. And if there's any money left over after the 30-day window, it go into the pot for the new program of business help that that the administration and the legislature will clearly come up with under the Biden plan. So I hope I didn't steal too much of your thunder, David. And if you could walk us through that, pull that up on the screen.
Are you all seeing draft 4.1?
Yes.
Great. So the highlighting is a change relative to the version as passed the House. So I'll let you read subsection A here.
Okay.
We're still keeping the $10 million figure, but there's a small carve out for BIPOC and
Women.
women, as we did in the other economic recovery grants.
but with the same issue that they had not gotten any other help.
Right.
Right.
So everybody had a chance to read this?
Yeah.
If it's not in yellow, it means it's house language.
That's correct.
Okay.
So the eligibility criteria are in B, domiciled or a primary place of business in Vermont, organized for-profit or nonprofit. Then you see, I'll let you read the changes here in 3.
When you get down to paragraph 4, this was a concern we talked about, as they didn't define what economic loss could be. It could be $1. It could be a reduced rate of profit. So instead of making 100% profit, they make 75%. Is that an economic loss? It probably is. And Joan says they're looking for a tax loss on the 2020 return.
Is everybody good on 3 and 4?
Yep. And 5?
So 5, the House had said that you either applied and were denied, or you had a good faith determination that you're not eligible to apply for the most recent round of the federal monies. And this adds in yellow state monies as well. So that narrows the universe so that the only businesses that would be eligible for this $10 million are the businesses that have received no prior assistance. Everybody good on that addition there?
Yeah.
Can I go back to 4 because, Mr. Chair?
Yep.
So I'm trying to understand how they demonstrate a tax loss if they didn't file a 2019 tax return.
So they're filing their 2020 tax return, presumably a business that started up in February 2020 has operated for 11 months or maybe part of that 11 months, and they file a tax return. If they have a loss, it's reflected on the tax return and they can carry it forward into future years. So they're wise to do that for tax purposes.
Oh, so it's not a tax loss over past years, but just that they have a loss on their business, a loss for an operation.
Right.
Okay.
It says on the 2020 tax return, right?
Okay.
Now, may I ask a question?
Mhm.
So I do know that, in part of this, the communities that we're, creating an opportunity for here, is it possible that a business would have so little income that they wouldn't have to file, or does that not apply to businesses like it applies to individuals?
Well, if they have a tax loss, they should file.
Right. I understand,
At
but is there a different requirement for businesses than from individuals? Because, individuals who have income under a certain amount often don't file taxes.
Well, when I asked Joan about the fact that people might not have filed yet,
Well, yeah, that's a yeah, but
so they should file, okay? The second thing is if they have a tax loss, they should file to have a record of that. So next
Right.
year they don't have to pay as much. And if they want this grant, they would have to file, even if they had very little income. I don't know the tax laws well enough to say that there's a minimum threshold for a business to file. And I think a lot of businesses generally won't file if they have a loss, but they probably should.
Right. No, this would encourage them to do if they even had a small loss. Right. Thanks.
Most business organizations do have a filing requirement and a mandatory minimum payment. I think the last time I saw, for instance, for an LLC, it was $250.
Thank you, David, because yeah, that's just a difference between corporations and business versus individuals. That was a concern. Great.
So I'm moving down to C, subsection C, so the amount of the grant, and that adds that the maximum grant is the lesser of the demonstrated loss, the 3 times the fixed monthly, or $150,000.
So on this one, if you recall, Joan testified that, I don't know whether she read it this way or whether she wanted it this way. She wanted the 3 times the fixed expenses to be a flat amount that you would get if it was less than 150,000. And we asked her, well, what if there's a business that, lost $5,000 for the year, but 3 times their fixed cost was 25,000? Do you want to give them 25,000? I don't think there was an answer, but I think they should only be getting a grant up to the amount of their loss,
Right.
not larger. So, and in any event, the House had intended that there be, it was, if you read it carefully on line 11, a grant shall not exceed the lesser of 2 and 3. So it could be that the grant could be less than both of those. And that's what we're putting in there. And if we don't put that in, then assuming the House wanted it to be, could be less than 2 or 3, how do you determine what it would be? It could be anything as long as it's less than that. So then you sort of flip into all these vague factors, weighting factors, and they say, well, 3 times your rent or whatever is $24,000, but we're only going to give you 6. But where did they come up with that number? So that's why we go back to what their losses are. We're giving them up to the maximum of their loss if it's the lowest of these of 1, 2, or 3. Okay, David.
All right, so the next piece is subsection D, and what was the sort of priority factor construct that the House had. And instead, there's 2 pieces about sort of looking forward. The first one, any amounts that a business receives from these funds will be deducted from future grant awards made under the American Rescue Plan Act. And in 2 here, any amounts that are unspent in this program will revert to ACCD, either for a future program or to the general fund.
So committee, on D1, I wonder how you feel. I'm thinking of maybe we should take that out because it sort of targets this pot of money where we don't necessarily say the same thing yet on all the other pots of money that people have gotten. I think it should be treated. I think they should all be treated. If they're going to adjust future grants for amounts received previously, they should do it for all the, how many tranches do we have? 3 or 4 now that have gone out, but they should treat them equally. So I think I would be in favor of not making this decision yet and leave it to the administration to come back and hopefully treat all the programs the same. I know one of the programs, David, did have language like this in it where they calculated the grant. They said less any money you previously received from PPP or state grants. Is that not correct?
It did not take them out on a 1-for-1. What it said, beginning with the original and then carrying forward, was that the agency, when it was coming up with the amount of the grants, has to consider whether a business has received assistance from other sources and how that should, or if and how that should reduce the amount of the grant award.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't feel we should be tying the hands of
Yeah, I agree.
the agency as we go forward. We sort of are beginning with a whole new slate with the American Rescue Plan. So,
Exactly. All right,
Yeah.
let's take D1 out, David. Unless anybody has any objections.
Good.
This reversion is, if Joan's correct, that they're going to use all the money up, it's not an issue. But I'm not trying to take any money from the agency. I'm saying it should go back to the agency, just get into the larger pot when we have more time to analyze what the new program would look like.
All right. So as has been in previous versions of these programs, they're directed to adopt guidelines, and in one, we would make sure they have a timeline for accepting applications and awarding grants. 3 relates to the appropriate use of grant funds for the purpose of business-related economic recovery. 4, 5, and 6 are standard from before. So I guess before I move on, let me just make sure everybody's good on E. Okay. And so there's a couple of new pieces after the reporting, and these are related to auditing, compliance, and recapture. And I'll just let you read that.
thank you. I think that's good.
Is that the end of it, David? Or no,
That
there's
is the end of it.
B1, it's the auditing and the
Oh,
recap.
I'm sorry. I forgot that there's
this is what
one
I
more new section.
this is what I talked about earlier.
Should it read Office of Legislative Counsel, COUNSIL?
Yes.
No.
No?
It used to be Council CIL, and then they changed it this past year so that everything is Council SEL.
Wow. I did
Where,
not.
where did that change?
Yeah, I did not know that.
There is this is a source of disagreement between the Legislative Council and the Senate Secretary's office, I believe. So it's not just you who have noticed the change. So to be continued.
I will
Well, I mean,
note
was there legislation or something that did this?
It actually
No.
was, yeah.
Senator Brock, aren't you chair
Was
of
it-
this committee?
I'm on the Legislative Council Committee, and we have
I'm
not
not.
discussed it.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
We
Well,
have not met for over a year, the Legislative Council Committee, I would point out.
That's one of those bills that apparently passed when all of us were absent.
Or maybe embedded somewhere.
Okay, so let me just say, this is a recommendation. That's all. I mean, the appropriations committees could say they like the House better. And then we would have to decide to do what we need to do in rebuttal. But I think this tightens the program, gives them all the money they want, keeps the money in economic recovery, but tries to do what a lot of us have argued, maybe targeted better to what the stated purpose was. So
Right.
I assume that I would go into appropriation, give the same spiel I just gave you folks and see what they say. Anybody want to talk more about this before we move on to Tom Kennedy's piece?
I think these are good improvements.
Thank
I
you.
think it targets it a little more narrowly, and I feel good about most of them.
Okay. Tom, do we have the language from Tom? Real brief. I think this is going to be very easy. Somebody,
What everybody should have it. Nathan has been sent it 6 ways to Sunday, I think.
Nathan, can you pull it up on the screen?
You can do that in 1 second.
Okay. You have such a calming voice, Nathan.
Part of the trade. Just let me know if you're seeing the language
Yep.
that he sent via email.
Yep.
Yep, there it is. Good. Thank you.
So, Tom, we can all read this. When you say excess funding will be directed to this Limitation Act sites, is that part of the list that we got from, is it Carol? Is it Carolyn Popolino or? I
Yeah,
forget. her first name.
Trish
Patricia.
Topolino is what we all call her.
Okay, I got it mixed up. Okay.
Trish,
So does that go to those? Is that what those sites are?
So the first 4 sites are in the BARA program, and then so those are listed there, and then I think what probably be clearer if the last sentence says excess funding will be directed. I would strike the Brownfield Reuse and Environmental Liability Limitations Act, take that out and just put it with sites with significant assessment or cleanup costs. Would you agree with that, Trish?
I think we want to have them in the BRELA program because then
Yeah.
it would be open to any site.
Okay, so
Does
that's
that-
so there's 2 programs here. One is with the large ones is what we call the BARA program, and then the second reference is to what we call the BRELA program, which is an insurance program.
Okay, so I'm a little bit confused. I thought the 14 million that everybody was talking about would take care of all of DEC's project needs. And now I'm reading it that the first 4 might potentially use up all of that 14 million. Tom?
So I can start and then Trish can. So the 14 million is just for sites in the BARA program. And those are these are the most significant projects in the state that have cleanup issues.
Okay, are the
So what we're
other,
suggesting here is we're going to allocate the 14 million.
right?
If there is leftover money after we do this, we then would put them in, we would then allocate whatever surplus funding is available to projects in the BRELA program.
Okay, I understand that, but are the projects in the BRELA program shovel ready that they would benefit from getting the money in the next month versus the middle of the summer?
Go ahead, Trish.
I couldn't get my unmute button. Yes, we have several projects that are in Umbrella that are shovel ready, that are requesting funding from us, that we actually just denied several of them because we don't have any more funding available to assist.
Okay. Well, if it's okay with the committee, when I present this language, I think we try and add some language to somehow capture that thought. I don't think we need to advance any more money right now before the Budget Act, except for projects that would take advantage of it. So just to say they have significant assessment and cleanup costs with not any concept of timing, I think we should have a phrase in there. You know, obviously we're not going to use shovel ready, but that captures that in there, because otherwise it should take its place with all other demands for general fund funding.
But given the need of the 4 projects identified, it's hard to imagine that there'll be any excess funding, but hey, you know.
Right. No, I agree. I agree.
That's
We should state it correctly, though.
Yeah.
Okay. So we got those 2 down. Is David still with us?
I hope so. So can we get rid of this screen share?
Yes.
Oh, thank you.
I don't know. I don't see David. Nathan, can you pull up S15?
I will pull it up in 1 second.
I don't have specific language yet on the mortgage assistance program, but what we talked about and Jane Kitchell supports is just, you remember Maura Collins came in and testified that she virtually can flip a switch and within a matter of days, she can reinstitute her program that ended in December. And she also testified that the new federal act, I think it has $40 million for mortgage assistance for Vermont, can be used to pay us back any funds we use for the same purpose back to January 1st. So obviously we want to capture those federal dollars for this rather than using general funds and not getting them back. So we'd have to come up for language with that, but it's pretty much that simple. Are there any questions on the mortgage assistance? Okay, we're almost done. I just want you to look at.
Somehow we've come up with S15 here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I mean, I love that bill and I voted on that bill, but it's not in our committee.
Is that the bill we just passed?
Yes.
I was
Yeah.
I was a sponsor of that bill. Wow.
Yeah. Well, we hijacked the bill for our purposes.
Okay, great.
Because it was our vehicle for a strike all.
Did this provision make it through? That was in my.
Yes.
Good.
Ballots can be cured.
Right, because I had a constituent that was very upset. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, David.
But
It should have
we're in
been-
a screen share with it. So
I need H315. I got the letter wrong and the number wrong. H315.
yeah, I couldn't find it on our website because it's not technically in our committee.
Well, we
So
could all go to the- we could
we'd
all
have
go
to
to-
go to
we could all
Probst.
go to the legislative page and pull it up. It's not a long bill, and I just want you to look at the homeless provision.
Yeah.
I think that's just what David had. That's an amendment. So let's all go to
Just go to
the
approach
legislative
website.
page and type in H315 as passed the House. Let's see, where is it? Come on. If you can work on finding that as well, David, that would be great.
I don't think David is still on the call.
Who, David?
David is not on
Yeah,
the call.
okay, I meant you, Nathan. Can you, well, I'm going to pull it up right. Do other people see H315 at this point?
I'm finding it. Bills passed. Yep. Here is under bills passed. 315.
Are you seeing the copy that is on your screen?
I have pulled up the thing that's on the legislative homepage under H315. And it's section 2. It's one paragraph. I can read it just in case people don't have it. The sum of $10 million of CRF funds is appropriated to VHCB in fiscal year 2021, which the board shall use in part through grants to nonprofit housing partners and service organizations for housing and facilities necessary to provide safe shelter and assistance for persons who are or are at risk of experiencing homelessness or have suffered economic harm due to the COVID-19 crisis in order to mitigate COVID-19 effects and enable compliance with COVID-19 public health precautions.
Right.
Upon the expenditure of funds, VHCB shall report to the House and Senate Committees on Appropriation on specific uses of the funds appropriated in the section. Gus came in and I said, why do you need this? Do you have, because there's $20 million in one-time money in the governor's budget for 2022. And he quickly corrected me. This was for the homeless, and it was not necessarily for their traditional work. So what they worked on with the CARES funding, they would continue to do that with CARES funding. We have a little bit of CARES funding left. So this is not the general fund one-time money. This is CARES funding for homeless.
Yep.
Okay, is that okay?
Yep.
Can you guys send me on my way?
Just a question, in the middle of that paragraph,
Mhm.
it appropriates the 10 million, and then there's an or who have suffered economic harm due to COVID crisis in order to mitigate and so on. So it seems that that paragraph is a potentially different from and additive to what might be done for people who are about to suffer or who are suffering homelessness, if I'm reading that correctly.
I think you
I just
are.
wonder what that is of that.
Yeah, it's pretty broad. I mean,
It's extremely broad. You can drive a truck through it.
It's like the economic recovery grant. They suffered an economic loss. So is that all they have to show to get? But it's to provide safe shelter and assistance for persons who have. So I
And it
mean,
goes on to say, who shall use in part through grants to nonprofit housing partners.
mhm. All right,
And
let me
It's
follow up on that.
broader than I'm comfortable with.
Yes, let me follow up and see if that's, that may be taken directly from previous appropriations. And if I can't get it nailed down, I'd be comfortable, Senator Brock, with raising it with appropriations, that we feel that that's kind of open-ended at this point, and we didn't have time to understand why, and they could follow up with it. Does that work, or do you want to really work on changing it right now?
Well, I mean, I'm just uncomfortable, when you throw $10 million around in that fashion
Okay,
without some rail around it. And I'm not sure if it's that hard to fix if we know what the intent is.
right. Well, yeah, you could take out in part, and you could take out who have suffered economic harm. But that may go too far if the money went to people beyond the homeless, but
Well, we could do instead of or, you could do and.
right. But that would have also a substantive change. So I just, you may be totally right, and everybody would agree with you, but I think I just need to ask some
Okay,
folks.
I mean, if we have if we take 24 hours to ask, I don't know if there's that harm.
Yeah, and I think we have that amount of time. I mean, I think I'll probably be called in this afternoon, but
Okay.
I don't think they're
Yeah,
voting on it.
My
Yeah.
sense is that this is Jane's wanting to move this out today. So
Oh, okay. Well, then I'll get back to everybody. I'll see what I can find out and get back.
All right,
to you.
okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, can I kind of add on to that line of questioning?
Yep.
When I read in order to mitigate COVID-19 effects, what I hear is that we are potentially looking back at costs behind us in the pandemic and not forward at ongoing costs for people experiencing homelessness and in crisis. And I'm just unclear if this allows them to make grants to look back at expended costs or only to look forward at ongoing homelessness exacerbated by the pandemic.
Good question. That looks like it's sort of old language, probably.
It just
So-
looks like
Well, it looks forward though, when
Yeah.
it says what the money should be used for, provide shelter who are and are at risk of, and that's future oriented, I think.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. I
When
don't think there's
word
anything that's
mitigate effects,
past.
it feels like mitigation could be looking back at.
Yeah,
That's all. I was
No, but mitigating going forward. I mean, we now have an additional crisis of them ending some of these housing arrangements. So it's very definitely very present, and mitigation is continuing. It's an ongoing thing.
Yeah.
There's nothing past tense to me about mitigating.
Okay, let me look. I'm becoming a pro in the and/or category
Oh,
from finance. Okay. All right. Well, I think I have enough direction, and I'll circle back with folks on this language. So, okay. I think that's it. Tomorrow, we're going to move on to S79, and I need to wrap my head around what else we're going to put on. On Thursday, we're going to talk about the American Recovery Plan. And
right.
have
And
Steve
we've-
Klein
and-
in.
I would hope that we would also, I mean, I would hope we'd be looking at the economic development and housing pieces, obviously, in the American Rescue Plan. And I would hope that we would have at some point a whole caucus of the whole to go through it. But that may be more than we can deal with at this point. But after crossover, it would be great to do that, because we'll finally have a pretty full sense of where we are with it.
Yeah, the housing piece is interesting because they already put 200 million into rental housing. Now I understand we're getting another 140
Yeah,
million.
and we're going to be challenged. I understand it's a lot more flexible, which is good, because that's the only way we're going to be able to spend more money.
Okay, I'm going to let people go.